Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome co-founder and managing partner, Red Media Africa, Chude JIDEONWO.
Right. Bonjour. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Everyone is looking bright and cheerful. You know, and even if that's not true, that's how it is in my head. So it's a pleasure to be here. We're going to be talking about what is our role as young people in Africa. Now, what I want to do today is, I've told my panelists, and I'm excited to meet them, even the prof, you'll be surprised by the prof, I've told them that we want to have a honest conversation for 30 minutes. We want to try and not speak in corporate speak or cliche. We want to try and see how much we will connect with the audiences today. As we talk about what your role is, because it's not really about us, it's about what your roles as young people in the emerging African continent should be. So I'll quickly do introductions of my guests on the panel, and then we'll start in earnest. First, on the left is Samir ABDELKRIM. He is the founder of Strathmore. He has visited 16 African countries within the past few years, trying to understand what drives young entrepreneurs in each part of Africa, mostly in the East, in the West, and in Central Africa. A round of applause for him, please. Thank you. Quickly, there is Aisha KARANJA. Aisha is blessed to have worked with the great, late Professor Mata. She is executive director of the Green Belt Movement. She's from Kenya. A round of applause for her, please. My new favorite prof, George NJENGA. He's the current and founding dean of the Strathmore Business School in Kenya. A round of applause for him, please. Let's do it. A round of applause, please. It doesn't cost a lot. It's just a round of applause. Thank you. And then finally, there is Roland NZIENGUI, who is the president of the National Youth Council of the Gabonese Republic. Now, he must get a round of applause. Thank you. Now, because he is the president of the National Youth Council, and he's from Gabon, and so he understands the audience, I will let him start by talking to you for a few minutes, about 3 minutes, on the things that are most important to him, and then Prof will start the conversation. Thank you. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Le Conseil national de la jeunesse,
The National Youth Council the National Youth Council is also the advisory board of the government regarding youth and its issues.
Okay, so somebody's supposed to be helping me out with
You need a receiver, sir.
This will be awkward. Okay, so I'm assuming that he talked about, we had conversations earlier about talking about what should young people be doing in politics and how should they be participating. So I was going to ask you, what role do you think young people should play in participating in politics in Gabon and then in Africa in general?
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I think this is an extremely relevant question because talking about participation of youth in Africa is a very important point. Things are clear. I would like to begin by quoting Bernanos, saying that it is the fever of youth that maintains the world at the right temperature. When youth cools down, the rest of the world freezes. And in our opinion, no society, no country, no continent can grow without the contribution and the presence of its youth in the development and creative process of wealth. But when we talk about this, we need to be clear. When we talk about participation, it isn't just enough for us, the young as young leaders, to participate passively, but rather to participate actively. In other words, for us, participation participation means being involved from end to end in the process, before, during, and after. And, you know, as Nelson Mandela used to emphasize, that everything that is done without us is against us, because everything that needs to happen in the world, everything that concerns us, involves consulting us first. And we are there as a force of proposal and to help development in our different countries. And still talking about the participation of youth on a global scale, I was myself ambassador of youth in the UN regarding development. The first thing we did was to make sure that the voice of the young was heard. And this involved the implementation of the youth program at global level. We also have to work at a continental level on the implementation of the African Youth Charter. But it is a global approach based on local action plans. So we have had to ensure that at national level, we should implement national youth policies to go from idea to action.
Right, thank you very much. Merci. So I guess that sets the agenda, and it's amazing because you and I were just talking about this just before we got on stage. But Prof, you wanted to, I had conversations with you and I said, you might want to take us a bit back so that we can move forward in terms of, we talk a lot about what young Africans should do and how young Africans should get involved, but then what really is this identity, this young African identity? And what does it mean? How can it guide us? I would just like you to take 3 minutes or 5, to help us set that agenda, and then the conversation will continue.
Thank you very much, Chude. And before I start exposing what I think the African citizenship, and especially the African youth citizenship, is all about, I'd like to say thank you very much to the Gabonese people, and at the head, their president, His Excellency Ali Bongo. I'd also like to say thank you to Richard Attias, who has been arranging this conference. So I think that the question we are dealing with here, and especially with the African youth, is one of Pan-Africanism. And when you think of Pan-Africanism, you have to think about what is it that unites all the people of Africa. Sometimes I'm sad that when I come to the West, many countries in the West of Africa, I hear about Francophonie Africa, and when I go to the eastern side of Africa, I hear about the Anglophony Africa. But I don't hear very much about Pan-Africanism, except in the names, the New York Forum for Africa, but we never really talk about Africa. And that's where I think the question lies for today's youth, people I have been working with for over 30 years now. The first thing we have to interpret, ladies and gentlemen, is what is the common good of Pan-Africanism? Is it about the black face? Is it about the white face? Is it about our language? I think most of all it's about our value systems, our dignity as Africans. And this is the fundament, that we have to retrain ourselves as youth, and those of you who are training in schools, to start believing in Pan-Africanism. The second thing that attracts me very much about this area is that obviously we are not talking about the black face or the white face or the yellow face. We are talking about anybody who will make this Pan-African space worth living for. Those who want to dedicate their lives for the good of the people who live in Africa. And therefore, I'm not talking about limiting ourselves from the rest of the globe. But immediately after that, you're going to ask me, but what really is the common good beyond these ideals? And the first thing I'd like to say is that under every president in our countries, under every minister in our countries in Africa, there must be somebody responsible for Pan-Africanism, and it must sit at the top of the agenda. In East Africa, we have the East African Commission, and the East African Parliament, and the person responsible for the East African Parliament sits right and advises the president. But I've been thinking more and more about Pan-Africanism replacing our East Africanism. The second thing is that we have to build markets. That is, an African in the West, in the South, and in the North has to exchange good gifts. We have to build the African market, because only in building the African market can we have the power to negotiate our future as youth. And it's nice to hear about all the entrepreneurs here in Africa. But sadly, when we started the Global Entrepreneurship Summit a few months ago in Kenya, it was quite evident that very few of the African entrepreneurs can derive a greater market in Europe, for the simple reason that there are barriers, and significant barriers. And therefore, what remains of us in building our common good as Pan-Africanists? It's building our markets. Let's break down the barriers. Let's not see ourselves as secluded from one another. Let's not hear people speaking about the Anglophone and the Francophone Africa. While I respect that I have to be more inclined to a Frenchman and more inclined to an Englishman or a Portuguese or an Equatorian who is Spanish, then I feel sad because I have sold my own Pan-Africanism. Right. And therefore, as we go there, we have also to see what is the social capital we have to build for the common good. And at that particular point, I want to go back to Chude and summarize. Social capital means that we have to get the best from those who are more advanced than us to build our own country and our own industry. So while we are speaking about sharing in what I call apprenticeship in industry, if we have very few industries, then we have to ask those who have greater industries to participate in our apprenticeship, but for the sake of growing Africa. And finally, when we are dealing with Pan-Africanism, we have also to think about free flow of finance and economic development. Where does finance flow from east to west, north to south? And these questions have to be answered by the very first point I said, that if we really want Pan-Africanism, it must sit very close to every president of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Now, you have, I'm going to come to you now. You have traveled the continent, so you can help break down the things that he's talking even further in a way that applies to young people. So you've tried to talk to incubators, you've tried to talk to influencers, you've had conversations with young people who are trying to start businesses from the scratch. Yeah. And so when he says that, when he talks about Pan-Africanism, and he makes a good point about bringing down those barriers, so a young person who's sitting there in the crowd is thinking, well, so how do I proceed? You know, what do I do? What's the first thing I need to do? And how do I, because you're talking about breaking down barriers between countries, but then some young people face barriers in their own countries. I'm talking of Gabon or Lagos or Nigeria or Accra. They can't even conquer the problems in their own countries. So what is the lesson that you've learned in going around that these young people and the young people who might be following us on social media need to learn from?
Bonjour à tous. Donc, je suis dans un pays francophone.
Good morning. I'm in a French-speaking country, so I will express myself in French. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. My name is Samir ABDELKRIM. I'm an entrepreneur, a consultant. I have created startup bricks in the emerging economies, and I have launched a project 16 months ago, during which I traveled the Africa of innovation through almost 15 countries. I went to Senegal. I left with a knapsack on my back, and not haphazardly, because I carefully prepared the project. I went to Mali, Kenya, Botswana, Mauritania, Algeria, Ghana, and I met hundreds of entrepreneurs with a project called Tech Africa, on which I am writing a book called Startup Lions, and I try to understand the ecosystems to meet the entrepreneurs to put them on the front line in the media, because beyond my blog, as a technological consultant for Les Echos, for example, and another newspaper, I have tried to connect them with people who could be partners or investors, and thanks to these articles, I was able to help an entrepreneur levy $50,000 for his project. So the question that is asked of me today involves the barriers to entry. And what I have seen in Africa today, I can say that innovation is everywhere, talent is available everywhere. Thanks to internet, thanks to technologies, there is a gradual disappearance of barriers to entry, and this is the reality of the world. Today, we can create a startup on the internet. We can have a server on Amazon. We can have information on Google. We can learn to encode on internet. We can even identify our initial clients and acquire them through Facebook, wherever we are in the world. And I think the second major strength of technological advances is that with internet we can create value, capture value with apps, with software that allow us to respond to issues such as applications for health, education, energy, transport, and all of these apps can help us solve current issues, and this strengthens us. We can do it from Gabon, from Benin, and from Senegal. What I have learned from this modest experience of mine, what has resurfaced in my mind, is that entrepreneurs are the initiators and are no longer awaiting to get the green light from the digital world. These people are prepared to show us the path to follow. They no longer wait for permission or authorization, and they are the ones to energize this new system. I can give you the example of entrepreneurs who, beyond family pressure, constant pressure from their immediate environment, why are you trying to create a company? How can you be an entrepreneur? Where will you find the strength to succeed? And Babacar Piran, for example, is someone who has developed today a connecting platform between project bearers in Senegal and the diaspora. It is called Baobab Entrepreneurship. He told me his story. At the beginning, he was a student, brilliant, and began to create for Airbus in Toulouse as a business developer, and he was one of those who worked on the latest model of Airbus. He had a sort of a revelation and decided to return to Senegal to launch his startup. Everyone tried to discourage him, his friends, his family. Nonetheless, he pursued his goal, and he recruited he recruited a team, and today, not only has his entrepreneurship won, but he is also amongst the top 10 of the Senegalese firms that have been recently created. He is an active and individual player of the economic and financial ecosystem and has helped others achieve their dreams as well.
Thank you. Thank you. A round of applause for him, please. But then what I want to do is, and you know, there are a lot of influencers on the African continent who are sitting down in this room or who are paying attention. And we're talking about the fact backstage, Aisha, that so people outside, people who come in, those of us those of you who are leaders, who travel, you know about this potential. We have these Africa Rising conferences every now and again. We talk about these things. Africans come in, and non-Africans come in and they see these opportunities. But young Africans in Africa, many of them continue to feel disempowered. They feel like these messages are over their heads. It's theoretical. It doesn't mean anything. And so what is it that makes it so possible for everybody else to see this potential, but for much of our youth population to still feel like this isn't real, like they can't engage with the reality of Africa's much talked about opportunity?
Thank you very much. And I would want to first of all say thank you very much to Richard and his team for inviting me here. And also I'm really humbled to really be in Gabon because, as most of you know, in the year 2009, the president of Gabon was the greatest supporter of Professor Wangari Maathai, and with 11 other heads of state, they actually appointed her to be the goodwill ambassador of the Congo Basin ecosystem. So as an individual, I'm very humbled. As a Kenyan, I'm really excited, and as an organization, I'm really thankful. And to get back to your question, I'm happy that you're saying that we talk as it is. And listening to all that is being said, and the young people who have been here, and to see all these youthful people here, I'm trying to think, and really just trying to think in my conscience and say, is there anything new that we are really saying? And my answer, unfortunately, is no. There's nothing new that we are hearing here. There's nothing new that we are really learning from here, other than these things have been said, but unfortunately, we have to keep talking about them. And the question probably today is, why do we keep talking about them? It's because we don't do anything about it. And for me, as I was talking behind there, we were talking about this year's theme for the International Youth Day, which was actually youth civic engagement, which very interestingly is the UN and the international world coming and saying that, yes, we need to involve the youth. Yes, we need to involve the youth in politics, in entrepreneurship, in everything, so that they be part of the growth we are talking about. For me, the challenge would be to the leaders today and say that we must keep talking. We must do something about it. This youth you see here, these very active and energetic men and women want to be involved. They want to be active. They want to make impact. They want to do something. So we as leaders must actually stop treating them as beneficiaries or targets. We must start seeing the youth as agents of change. We must work with them and not work for them. Because if we work with them, we work with them from the beginning. But if we treat them as beneficiaries or targets, we will be thinking for them, we will be doing things for them. And from what we are hearing today and seeing all these people are capable. They want to be involved. They don't want to be hearers. They want to do something. So I would challenge our leaders and say, let us work with them. Let us work with them, not for them. Let us empower them. But again, I also want to say that we must also, as leaders, stop focusing on completion of projects. We must start focusing on impact of whatever we do. What is the impact on the youth? It is not just a project to just complete and say, this is over. We must focus on the impact. And I'm very excited to see the energy here. I would want to ask the youth that, again, even as we talk to our leaders, the policies are there. Most of the policies are there. Every country has policies. But are they being implemented? But we must rise and walk as youth. We cannot sit and just wait for things to be done for us. Whether somebody is listening or not, we must rise up and we must say that we have to do what we have to do. And we must avoid the small gains. The short-term gains is what is destroying our youth. Because our youth really want to reach there very quickly, unfortunately. But there needs to be patience. Our youth need to be patient. Another thing I want to say is, first of all, Africa has really, we must be proud of ourselves as Africans because we have resources, but unfortunately, these resources are not really translating into the economic power for the youth. And I must say that there is a lot of gain because there is a lot of education. Most of our youth now have skills. They are very educated, they are very energetic, and they really are doing something. But unfortunately, 75 million youth, 75 million young men and women in this continent still do not have the skills. Not because they don't want to have the skills. It is because they don't know where to get the skills. They don't have the resources to get the skills. And that is where now your questions come to. Why do we have foreigners getting attracted by what we have as Africa? When they come to Africa, they succeed. But for some reason, as youth, we feel we cannot succeed in our own countries. Right. So for me, I think it's the system. We must look at our systems. Right. And our leaders really just have to really sit down and think about performance, what we are doing about the systems, and why the situation is the way it is.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to you, Andy. But I want to ask you a specific question. Okay, so that resonated with the audience. So I want to ask you a specific question. So what is the first thing that a young, again, I want to start from Gabon, because we are in Gabon, in Libreville. What's the first thing, therefore, that a young person who wants to achieve his or her full potential within this country and then within the continent, what's the first thing that he or she should be doing or should be thinking about doing?
Merci.
Thank you.
J'ai entendu parmi les
I
panélistes
heard
panafricanisme.
one of our
Il y a un
panelists
qui a parlé de la
mentioned
jeunesse en tant que moteur de
Pan-Africanism,
développement comme
others
succès.
talking about the
Il y a
youth
également
as
eu une
vehicles
intervention
for
sur
progress and
l'entrepreneuriat.
success.
Mais oui,
We've also
voici les
heard
clés
people
du
express
développement même de la
factors regarding
jeunesse.
entrepreneurship,
Mais
but
je vais
these are the
m'appesantir sur un
key
aspect
issues
particulier,
facing our
c'est
youth.
celui de
But I would like to
l'entrepreneuriat.
focus
Parce que
on one specific
aujourd'hui, nous, en
phenomenon,
tant que
which
jeunes,
is
on doit voir
entrepreneurship.
que l'État ne peut plus tout faire.
Because the
Dans un pays
state
comme le
can no
Gabon,
longer do
ce qu'il faut
everything on
comprendre,
its
c'est que
own. In a country
l'administration
such
publique,
as
donc, la
Gabon,
fonction publique est
public
saturée.
administration
Et la santé
and
idoine
the
aujourd'hui, c'est
civil servant
l'entrepreneuriat,
population
notamment
are
l'entrepreneuriat des
extremely
jeunes.
saturated
Et là,
on one hand and
le vrai
numerous on the other.
problème, et
And the real
lorsqu'on
issue
a
we
lancé
face
en
when we launched in
2005, le processus de
2005,
consultation dans le cadre de la
the
Charte africaine de la jeunesse,
consulting
nous avons posé la
process
question à plusieurs
for
jeunes. Qu'est-ce que
African
vous
youth.
voulez faire
We've
dans la
asked the
vie?
question of several
Mais
people.
je vais vous décevoir.
What do you want to do in life?
La plupart des
But I
jeunes,
will
ça se
disappoint
dit,
you. Most
je vais
of
être
these young
président,
people say,
je vais
I
être
want to be
ministre,
president,
je vais
I
être
want to
un
be
homme politique,
minister,
je vais être
I want to
élu.
be a
Mais cela est
political
dû à
person.
quoi?
Right.
C'est
I
parce
have
que
to stop you there because we have 5 minutes.
Why?
I have to stop because
Why
we have
is
5
this the
minutes.
case?
But then what you say is crucial. So I think the first thing is that young people appear not to have an answer, a clarity as to what I really want to do. What's the true talent, or what's the true capacity, or what's the true potential that I have? And so they're answering easy questions like, I want to be president, I want to be a governor, I want to be a senator. So that's a good step. Because I want everybody else to have 1 minute, because we have to go, I'm going to move to you from there. So there's a lack of clarity, because young people can't even listen to their own hearts, because they are facing basic issues: water, access, electricity, power. I heard people screaming and whooping over taxes, and all of that. So what's the one thing that they need to do to achieve that clarity, to achieve that purposiveness, as it were, in 1 minute?
Thank you, Chude. So immediately I will say that Africa's education is in a deplorable state.
Right.
So it's obvious that if we want the youth to be useful for their continent in general, we must read a good figure about the number of years and technical capability there is. So the first thing I'd like to say is, how must we build the technical schools in our African continent, in our African space? Technical schools that will show, and sorry for using this example, an African how to have precision like a German, a person who will understand a cultural appreciation like a Frenchman, a person who will understand exquisiteness of language like an Englishman. Sorry for using this, but that's the kind of thing we like. The second thing I'd like to say is that in order to promote these generously within the African policy fundamentals, I would say one little thing: buy Africa.
Right. Okay.
Unless our governments, who form the largest part of the business of our own African economy, I would suggest it lies between 60 and 70%.
Right.
And that is why we like these presidents. Let's tell our governments that before they buy anything from any other part of the world, the first thing they must do is to buy Africa. If we do that, we are going to grow our capability.
Right.
And if we don't have it, we build it.
Right, excellent. So buy Africa. So he said there's a lack of clarity. Young people can't even find the mental space to decide what they should do. He mentioned education. So education helps to clarify these choices, because then we have the benefit of perspective. But then a young person sitting down here or anywhere else is saying, well, education is not my fault. I only take advantage of the education that my country offers me. So what's the one thing that a young person faced with a deplorable education system or one of those young people who constitute the 75% of the youth population, or 70 that's out of school, what is that young person to do for his or herself or for his or her family?
For me, I think, first of all, it's the system, the education system. And so for us as the youth, we need to identify and know the difference between good leaders and bad leaders. We have the votes, we have the capability, let us vote them out, and then those who can listen to us, let's vote them in, good leaders.
Right, thank you, thank you. I'm going to ask for 3 more minutes. I'm going to ask for 3 more minutes because I have kept the time, but they always oppress young people. If you think we are being oppressed, let me see your hands up. Thank you for the 10 people. And so I'm going to demand youth inclusion with 3 to 5 minutes. Now, she's made a very crucial point. He says clarity, he says education, and then some young people don't have the capacity to provide their own education. So she says, be able to clearly identify a good or a bad leader, because that's what leads to the choices, the policies that can enable good education. And so when a young person has been able to help, and this is a long-term process. You vote probably every 4 years. I think in Gabon's case, every 7 years. You can't really, after you voted, you have to wait for your leaders to take responsibility. Now, within the space, within the 7-year or 4-year space, between one election to the next, what should the young person who wants to make a difference, what should he or she be doing in 1 minute?
Alors, moi, je pense que si l'exemple ne vient pas
I
d'en haut,
think
il faut
that if
incarner
the
l'exemple.
example
Et là, la
doesn't
question
come from the
cruciale,
top, then
c'est-
we
je
have to
pense que
set
c'est
the example.
L'Afrique a
And the
besoin, ce sont
crucial
des rôles
issue
modèles.
here
Rôles modèles,
is
c'est-à-dire
that
des
what
exemples à
Africans
suivre, des
need
success
are
stories.
role models based on success
Notamment
stories,
au niveau des jeunes.
particularly amidst
Aujourd'hui,
our
c'est
young.
pour ça que je reviens toujours sur cette
And
thématique-là,
today, this is
l'entrepreneuriat
why I
technologique,
always
qui a cette
return
possibilité,
to
l'entrepreneuriat
entrepreneurship
technologique
and
permet à la multitude
technology,
d'entreprendre.
because this
Il y a plus de
gives
barrières à l'entrée.
many,
Je
many
vais prendre un
people
exemple, un autre.
the
Lorsque j'étais
capacity
un des
to
incubateurs
undertake.
qui m'a le plus frappé, je l'ai rencontré
One
au
of the
Bénin, à
people who
Cotonou.
has
Il s'appelle
left me
TechXL.
with strong
TechXL,
memories.
c'est un
I met him
incubateur qui
in
forme
Benin, in Cotonou,
chaque année
and he
plusieurs dizaines de
trains
jeunes,
every
dont
year
énormément
several
de jeunes filles
dozen young
béninoises,
people,
au code, au
young
langage informatique, et qui leur apprend à
women
créer des
in
applications.
Benin are
Avec un pari
trained
assez fou,
in
qui sont partagés
IT
par tous ces
language.
jeunes. J'ai passé plusieurs jours,
And I
j'étais
spent
frappé par
several
leur
days
audace,
with them, and
et
I was struck
qui est de
by
devenir les
their
meilleurs
courage
développeurs au monde.
and
Et ce
by their
pari-là, ils
daring
font tout pour le tenir.
approach. And
L'histoire
they
du
are
cofondateur
doing
de TechXL,
everything
elle est
in their
intéressante. Il
power
s'appelle
to
Ulrich.
become qualified
Il est
in
aujourd'hui
this
il est très
particular
jeune, il doit avoir la
area.
vingtaine. Et aujourd'hui,
There
il a
is, in
tout
this very
simplement
young person,
créé son entreprise, sa
the
première entreprise. Il l'a créée dans un
capacity
cybercafé
to
parce qu'elle n'avait pas les moyens de se payer un
create
laptop.
a firm
Aujourd'hui,
and enterprise,
TechXL
and he
fabrique
created a
des
cyber
produits, des applications
cafe,
qui non seulement ont l'attraction en Afrique, mais surtout
producing
dans le monde entier.
apps that are
Et
not just
je
popular
pense
in
que
Africa, but also worldwide.
aujourd'hui, Ulrich est un rôle modèle. J'avais
And
évoqué
he
Babacar, qui
is
lui
a
aussi
role
est
model.
un
I
rôle
also
modèle.
mentioned
I
Babacar,
have
who
to
is
stop you
also
there.
a role model.
I have to stop you there. Fantastic. So basically, courage. You're saying that young people should have the courage to insist on their dreams. And I think that's a good way to end this message today. We've realized that people talk a lot on the continent. Leaders talk a lot. Conferences talk a lot, which is a good thing. We should talk, but we should follow the talk with action. But more than that, young people should no longer be afraid to demand that action, and where that action doesn't exist, to stand in the gap and become their own role model. Because what makes us limited the most is fear. And so if young people realize the education system might be bad, the policies might be bad, the leaders might be hypocrites, but if I can allow myself and permit myself to create, to believe, then I can actually do something that disrupts the corruption that I see. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening attentively. I hope we've been able to add value. I thank my panelists for making good use of our oppressed time format of 30 minutes. I thank, because everybody thanked Richard, so I will thank you, Richard, for inviting all of us here. A round of applause for the New York Forum Africa. Thank you. Thank you very much. A round of applause for them, please. A round of applause for me, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you.